Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer, where we take complex research and break it down into clear, actionable insights. If you're a focused learner looking to maximize your time, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're tackling something huge. We're exploring how the metaverse is being used to conquer one of the absolute hardest professional skills imaginable: public speaking in a foreign language. So let's just get right into it. Can literally putting a virtual reality headset on your face actually make you a better public speaker in the real world? For the longest time, VR was really just seen as a gaming peripheral or kind of an entertainment gimmick. But today we're going to look at some hard data that suggests it just might be the ultimate tool for leveling up your professional communication and language skills. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to hit 1. The public speaking problem, 2. The metaverse experiment, 3. The shocking results, 4. Why VR actually works, 5. Not a magic bullet, and finally 6. The future of practice. Starting with Section 1, the public speaking problem, and the struggle for authentic practice. Look, if you have ever had to present in a professional setting, especially if you're doing it in a second language, you know the struggle for authentic practice is incredibly real. Traditional educational settings face massive barriers when they try to teach oral communication. I mean, think about large undergraduate classes. There simply isn't enough time for everyone to practice extended, authentic speaking. And then, of course, there's performance anxiety, which literally paralyzes a lot of students. Plus, traditional classrooms totally lack real-world environments. Standing up and presenting to a room of your peers in a sterile lecture hall, that doesn't exactly feel like a high-stakes international commerce meeting. All of this just contributes to this passive learning model, where students are just memorizing lines rather than actually engaging. Which brings us to Section 2, the Metaverse experiment, 2D versus 3D immersion. Researchers really wanted to know what happens when you swap that traditional classroom for virtual reality. To figure this out, they conducted a fascinating quasi-experiment with 146 commerce undergraduates over at the Complutense University of Madrid. They broke it down into 3 steps. First, they made sure all the students started with equivalent, relatively low English-speaking baselines. Second, they gave them a super practical task: create a promotional product pitch video in English. But the third step is the catch. They split the students into 2 groups to compare the actual technology they used to complete that exact same task. So here is how they set it up. We have our control group, and they used conventional 2D webcams, smartphones, your basic social media editing tools. Then, we have the experimental group. They used immersive VR headsets, full 3D spaces, and interactive avatars to simulate real professional commerce scenarios. Think virtual shops and virtual meeting rooms. The syllabus, the teacher, the classroom conditions, completely identical. Literally, the only variable they changed was the technology. Section 3. The shocking results. A massive performance gap. Okay, what actually happened when it came time to grade their speaking skills? The magnitude of the performance gap here is just staggering. Students were graded on a rubric out of 10, evaluating things like pronunciation, fluency, lexical range, pragmatic appropriateness. The control group, the ones using the standard 2D video, averaged a 4.39. That is hovering right around the fail threshold. But the experimental VR group, they absolutely rocketed to an average of 8.47, putting them firmly in the good to excellent range. The VR group just massively outperformed their peers in their speaking performance. Section 4. Why VR actually works. The psychology of tech acceptance. I mean, a 4-point jump on a 10-point scale is massive. So we have to unpack the psychology of why this is so incredibly effective. To understand this, researchers looked at the Technology Acceptance Model, or TAM. Basically, TAM explains why we embrace or reject new tech. It boils down to 2 things: perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. The students embraced VR because the task was designed to be straightforward, so that checks the ease of use box. But much more importantly, they realized that practicing a commerce pitch in a virtual shop felt highly relevant to their future careers. They perceived it as incredibly useful, and that drove their intention to use it and ultimately their actual day-to-day engagement. And this builds even further with the UTOUT model. That's the Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology, which adds this really crucial social layer. It tells us that social influence and facilitating conditions matter deeply. See, because the professor explicitly endorsed VR, and because the students were collaborating with their peers in the metaverse, VR wasn't just some solo video game anymore. It gained actual social legitimacy. Plus, the university provided the devices and the technical assistance. Those are your facilitating conditions, which completely transformed VR from a novelty into a valued professional practice. Now, beyond the academic models, the students themselves reported some really incredible psychological perks when they were surveyed. One of the most fascinating to me was temporal distortion, basically scoring high on that sensation of time passing quickly, which indicates they were in a state of deep focus and flow. Because they were so highly immersed, they were way less focused on their immediate physical surroundings in the real world, which actively reduced their performance anxiety. They were practicing in this safe, simulated environment that still completely felt authentic to a business setting.
And I think this quote from the survey data perfectly encapsulates that shift in mindset. With VR, I'm not limited to passively consuming information and images displayed on the screen. That is exactly it. VR transitioned these learners from being passive audience members into active, exploratory participants. They weren't just reading about a product on a page, they were holding a virtual version of it and pitching it face-to-face to an avatar.
Section 5. Not a magic bullet. The caveats of immersive learning. As much as we might want to just throw out our textbooks and hand everyone a headset, we do need to be realistic here. Let's look at the students' prior VR experience. About 36% had tried it more than once, 32% had tried it exactly once, and 32% had literally never tried it at all. The success of that experimental group wasn't because they were all tech-savvy gamers. Experience was super evenly split. This proves that the technology itself didn't just magically make them better speakers. The massive gains in speaking skills came from exactly how the technology was applied, not just the tech itself. VR is only effective when it's paired with really sound instructional design. It required collaborative scripting beforehand, it required structured rehearsal, but most importantly, it required strong teacher mediation. Without clear communicative objectives and scaffolding from a real educator, honestly, VR is just a distraction. Furthermore, this survey data revealed a really interesting boundary. When students were asked to rate the importance of real human social interaction in their education on a 1 to 5 scale, they gave it a massive 4.63. They deeply value human contact. However, when asked about VR's efficiency for evaluating their learning compared to reality, that score dropped all the way to 3.18. So students absolutely love VR for practice and motivation, but they remain highly cautious about letting an immersive simulation completely replace real-world evaluation and human presence.
Finally, Section 6, the future of practice, redefining the classroom.
That nuance we just talked about is absolutely vital as we look forward at how we learn to communicate. The main takeaway from this whole study is clear. VR is a powerful complement to human interaction. It is not a replacement. Think of it as providing this safe, highly dynamic sandbox. It allows you to enter a state of flow, practice your language skills out loud, dramatically lower your anxiety, and simulate the exact professional environment you need to master. You do the messy work of refining your skills in the metaverse so you can bring that confidence back into the real world. And that brings us to our final thought. The data clearly shows that immersive tech can utterly transform how university students conquer their fear of public speaking. So I want to leave you with this question to ponder. If VR can safely simulate the massive pressures of a commercial pitch and literally double a speaker's performance in a classroom, what could a few hours in a headset do for your next big presentation? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.